Welcome back. Now, how many times have you booked a cab through an app only for it to be cancelled at the last moment? Well, it's not just you, but rather a whopping 84% people, according to a survey that was conducted by local circles who have been victims of cab cancellations. Remember, 84 people who have said cabs have just cancelled on them or drivers have cancelled on them. The survey has outlined two most common reasons for cancellations. First, cancelling cabs once a destination is known to the driver, and that would mean that if you have put in X destination, it is cancelled by the driver or the concerned cab person because they don't want to go to that particular destination. Second, the non-cash payments to drivers, they want it in cash. Well, that of course has a much larger implication, and it's also because just the delay of money that they get from the cab aggregator themselves. Now, cancellation of cabs is not the only issue faced by commuters. After ride cancellation, 62% of survey respondents have complained about surge pricing. Long wait time is also a common complaint which is raised. I'm surprised that all of this is just at 67 and 48%. I don't know if many people who would just be very happy with how quick the vehicle would come. Vehicles, cleanliness and cancellation charges are some of the concerns flagged off by commuters as well. Now, I'm being joined by Sachin Taparia, who's a founder for Local Circles. Thank you very much, Mr. Sachin Taparia, for joining us. Just some very few quick questions. None of this is really a surprise. I think every one of us at some individual level has gone through this. But if you could tell me how many people were sampled for this and what was the
So,
demography like?
so we received about 44,000 responses, Sneha, across the country from about
That's quite a number.
270
Mhm.
plus districts of the country. So this isn't just Delhi, Mumbai, metro survey, but a tier one, tier two, tier three, wherever these taxi services are working, it has covered pretty much all of those districts. And the two key issues that have, really come out, two or three, is one is, on the top is of course the drivers canceling rides, like you mentioned, and then the surge pricing is another major issue, and the long waiting times is an issue in some cities. But net what has actually happened here, Sneha, is in 2020 the Ministry of Road Transport came out with certain guidelines under the Motor Vehicle Act, which had to be operationalized by all the state governments across the country. That really hasn't happened. So there were some safeguards for consumer
Hmm.
protection, for ensuring there is a cap on surge pricing, and a whole bunch of reforms. Secondly, there are no standards as such in the country for taxi aggregators, and hence you have all these issues where drivers are canceling rides. There is no disincentives for the drivers to actually cancel those rides. While if you as a consumer cancel the ride,
Actually,
you are
Mr.
penalized with.
Sachin, let me just ask you a counter question. Did you by any chance do you plan to take a survey of the drivers as well? Of the cab aggregators, of the cab drivers? It would be interesting to see what the other side looks like.
So about 2 years ago, ET Now had done a show on this survey that we had done in 2022, and there were some of the driver associations. Their representatives were in there, and they had their own issues with the platforms essentially. So I think the reform is basically, you need a systemic reform where the incentive structure is set in a way that it works for the drivers and it works for the consumers, right? Just solving the problem for the consumers may not work for the drivers, and I think that is where the platforms have to make the entire service more consumer centric. Is it better than what we had before the app taxis arrived? Of course we are better off. This service is convenient. It works, most of the times. Especially in tier two and tier three
Right.
cities, the cancellation rates are lower. But there are issues like drivers canceling. There are issues like cab maintenance, long waiting times that still need resolution. And I think that is why you need these standards in the
Right.
country. So that way, any operator that is
So
a
if at all
taxi
that
aggregator has to comply with certain minimum standards before they can actually start providing a service like this.
So for the cab aggregators who are watching us, Mr. Sachin, what would you say would be the top 4 major concerns?
So again, from a consumer standpoint, it's the rides being cancelled by the drivers, and we have gotten cases where the driver has actually arrived at the location where the consumer is, right? So it's literally the consumer is relying on the driver, and then the driver says, "I'm not going to take you," right? So it's driver cancellation number one, followed by surge pricing, followed by long waiting times at in certain cities like Bangalore is one example, and then the fourth is again cleanliness and safety, essentially the basic hygiene factors which people expect. And I think there is a broader issue at play here, Sneha, which is for very long these taxi
Mm-hmm.
services have tried to be everything for everybody. I think they're slowly realizing that there are different segments of the consumer base. You have the upper middle class and the middle class, and then you have
Right.
people who actually are the right service that they can pay for is actually a bike taxi, but they've also been using those same cabs. So therefore, standards have just not been maintained because through discounting and other practices, a lot of things have it's been an artificial playing field, rather than a very realistic model where you are actually providing, certain services for upper middle class, and some other services for
No,
people, who can't
just one
afford
question,
expensive
Mr.
services.
Sachin. Since you bring in this class differentiation, how does that really help? Because frankly, there are people who, I mean, at least for the past few months, if you see, things have diversified. You have auto rickshaws, you have bikes, you have two-wheelers that can be booked on these cab aggregators. But it's not like your cars are cleaner, they are better, particularly in the national capital as well. It's not like that. So I don't think really this is about class differentiation. And even if you can't afford it, and you are still paying, no one is giving you a free ride, sir. Everybody is paying through their pockets whether they can afford it or not. So clean cars really can't be an excuse for unclean cars can't be really an excuse for class differentiation for that matter.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. And again, because the whole ecosystem has gotten used to a certain way of working, it's very hard to change that. And I think that's where the platforms, Sneha, have got to play a much
Right.
bigger role in ensuring that there are standards, and every
Sure.
car has to be a certain way, essentially, before you can say that this car is available for a
Right.
ride. So I think we're not implementing those standards. We don't have the
Absolutely.
standards, and nor are they enforcing or implementing anything like that. And I think that is critical to kind of take the
Fair
service to the
enough.
next level and have the consumer trust at the same time.
Right. Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Taparia, for joining us. I'm sure there's one thing definitely that your survey will do. It's not like these cab aggregators were not aware of all these points. I am sure they would be. But now there is something very concrete to work upon, and it will be only for their good. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Great being here. Thank you.
Well, it's time for a short break. On the other side, news and updates will continue.